everyone. My name is Mskindness B. Ramirez, and I'm thrilled to be back for another episode of Bridges, Courageous Conversations, where in season 1, we have centered the conversations around race, equity, and inclusion. These are critical discussions designed to speak to those who are eager to build bridges that will impact real change in our society. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Tiffany Watkins. And together for this episode, we'll be spotlighting the topic of white privilege.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Watkins, and I am the co-host of this fabulous show that enlightens people on a multitude of subjects. Today's subject is going to be so powerful and so enlightening. I'm excited to get into it.
Absolutely. Our guests today are two wonderful women in cannabis. They work in the industry, but each of whom have had uniquely different experiences growing up as white women in the United States. But they will also help to shed light on many of the realities that come with that privilege. Ready, Tiffany?
We will welcome them right away, and we are excited to talk to them.
Yes, I'm eager to get into this. Let's go. I'm eager to get into this convo. And while they're joining us on the stage, I just want to thank my co-producers, Lisa Snyder of Tokeativity, and of course you, Tiffany Watkins of Vanguard Media Online. Without each of you, this would not be possible. So excited to bring this message to the masses and get into this very special conversation today.
For sure. Thank you.
All right, so let me welcome our guest to the stage, Ms. Ishqa Hillman, CEO of the Canna Boss Babes and author of Weed Mom, Danielle Simone brand.
Hi.
Welcome, ladies.
Thank
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So thrilled to be here with you.
What a convo. What a convo.
It's going to be a good one today.
Let's do this. Let's first just remind the audience of who you are, right? We know you from a lot of other places, and that's why we invited you ladies to join us today. You're comfortable taking the stage and sharing your experiences. This is a powerful conversation we're going to get into. So I always like to just warm the room up by getting us all on the same frequency. So if we can, because these conversations can be intense and they can bring up a lot of emotions, I like to center us with our breath. So if together we can just take a few quick inhales and exhale with the intention of sharing knowledge and some of our freedoms and our wisdom. Thank you, ladies. Ishqa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am the CEO of the Canna Boss Babes, which is an entrepreneurial support platform that was designed originally to help support the women in cannabis who felt unheard and unsupported, and particular challenges as women in the ability to thrive in the space. And so what started off as consulting and services and just powerful connecting turned into a podcast over the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to connect women and men. There's so many good men out in the world, all throughout the world through this plant, and it's in the industry and all the healing available. So it's been exciting, including Danielle. So
yeah.
Love that. Really important work, uplifting women, especially in the cannabis space. Thank you for what you do, Ishqa.
Yeah.
Danielle, I've got your book right here. It's literally right here. I can reach out and touch it. Tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and the inspiration for Weed Mom.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I feel very blessed to have worked with all of you ladies in different capacities over the last couple of years, in some cases, many different capacities, and to have these conversations. I am the author of Weed Mom, as you mentioned. I'm a cannabis journalist. I also write about psychedelics, And really the intersections of plant medicine and parenting are what specifically interest me. And, I came to cannabis a little later in life, I have to say, and I tell the story in my book of how I was a skeptic before I became an advocate and enthusiast. And, it was really that journey, that personal journey that led me to write this book, because I realized after, having a lot of stereotypes and stigmas about cannabis, that as a mother, it is so helpful, as a wellness tool, as a medicine, as something that connects us and builds, communities and friendships and so many different, positives for moms. And so that's really the inspiration for the book. And my platform is, how do we empower ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally with this plant?
Yes. And I have read the book, and I am a weed mom. And I feel like it's extremely representative of many of the thoughts that go through our minds. So thank you for that, because living at this intersection, for me, it's Black woman, mother, entrepreneur, C-suite, right? Executive, all of these things, wife, teacher, advocate. But I think weed mom is at the front of that. So it makes me able to do all those other things.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
All four of us probably agree on that here. Thank you.
Yeah, we definitely do. We definitely do. It is and I love your book as well. I love the idea of putting women in the center and saying we are all things, not to just judge us on one portion of it, which really does happen when we're Canna moms. You get judged on that one little portion and nothing else you do matters. So it's wonderful to provide a voice in that way. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, this is going to be good, like we said. So we really can't wait to kind of dive into what we want to talk about today. I think it's great to start with definitions for folks to understand what this means. What is white privilege? Because we hear a lot about this. This has been a real kind of buzz term over the last few years, at least, but it's a concept that's always been around, right? So why don't we, let's start with you, Ishqa. How do you define white privilege?
White privilege to me is being treated differently because of my skin color. It's being treated better because of my skin color, being given access to things because of my skin color, opportunities, whatever it is, that just simply because of how I look, bids access and acceptance.
Yeah. Understood. How about you, Danielle?
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. I mean, it basically means that I don't have to think about, white people don't have to think about what it means to be white when we go out in the world. We don't have to think about adjusting our behavior in certain situations or appearance in order to be safe or to be, not judged, at least, for our skin color. We may be judged for other things, being a woman, et cetera. But, certainly for skin color, it's something that, being white, you don't have to, keep that with you at every moment of every day. How are people going to receive me because of my skin color? And of course, it also comes down to the ease of finding things, in many places across this country that, match white people's skin tones and, hair needs and things like that. It's the ease of just not having to think about your race or skin color out in the world.
Right.
It's so true. Yeah. And right now, what you just said, like these things, these little tiny nuances that we just moving through society don't even notice on a daily basis. And then the question comes up of, why do you have to highlight that this is for brown skin tones? Why does that have to be at the front of the commercial? Well, it's because it never has been. It's because all that was available before was not my skin tone. So now we have to bring attention to this.
Band-Aids. Every time I see Band-Aids and all the new shades that they have, I'm like, well, first of all, why is it new? But like, thank you. Finally.
Yeah. Why did it take so long? Band-Aid. So long. There's such a simple thing.
Oh. It did.
I don't know whose skin tone that ever was. It wasn't quite mine. It wasn't quite mine. It was closer to mine than other people's. But orange. Was the Trump? I don't know.
Right, the array of colors, we don't know why, but we know that they're out there now, and that it's been a long time coming, right? I think that when I hear the term white privilege, I'm the first thing that shows up in my brain. I go in pictures. If it shows up, is that I don't have to. I have to show up to a place, and my story precedes me. Who I am precedes me. I don't get to show up with a blank slate and have folks accept me for who they're going to meet. There's a preconceived notion as to who I am. And white people do not have to show up that way. You're able to have a clean slate or just an open one to walk in and provide your story, not to walk in and someone say, oh, well, I wonder if she had a father. I wonder if she went to college, or is there money in her family for her to go to college? All these questions and all these preconceived notions as to who I am when I walk in. So I don't get to walk in without a story already. And there's a huge level of privilege in that. And I won't say it's not necessarily negative, but it is definitely present. How about you, Mskindness?
I'll say it's negative. I definitely will say it's negative. I'll say that I don't appreciate being okay. Let me be clear. I do appreciate being a Black woman. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, winning, but I don't appreciate having to be the Black woman or the representative, or, as we've talked in previous episodes, the token, right? Mm-hmm. I want to choose that. I like being the first because there has to be representation, but it's all in the way it's being framed. And you're right. Like, before Mskindness comes, she's this, and those identifiers generally are centered around the way I look. They are centered around my race first, and then these other things. Because I have dreadlocks, that's another factor, right? We've talked about this, Tiffany, with your hair choices, right? Choosing not to straighten it and how you wear a mohawk. These are all things that precede us. And so, yeah, it's what everyone said. It's Ishqa's definition of it's about color. I mean, just the term white privilege says, let's talk about color. But where it came from is what I want to dig into as we move forward. Like, this concept that Danielle said, like, oh, well, it's the idea that I don't have to worry about how I look walking into a room, that I don't have to think about whether or not I'm going to be accepted. That is the privilege. It's the fact that I can easily go into a store and find a variety of skin tones that are like mine and my cousins, but not Mskindness's and her cousins. Why? The why? Like, that's what we keep digging into, but I never want to let people forget how we got here. What are some reasons you think? And I obviously got some ideas in my head, but how did we get here? How come you can just walk into a store, Danielle, and not have an issue finding tights or Skims or makeup in your skin tone? Why is that even a thing?
I mean, I feel like we can go really far back with this question. I think, when we were speaking about this initially, I said, are we going back to guns, germs, and steel? I mean, racism and racist institutions and policies go back a very long time in our world. And specifically in this country, it goes back to racism and the, aftermath of that we're still living in. Even though conditions have improved for Black Americans in this country, they have not, absolutely gotten to the, it's incremental. It's really incremental.
Tiny little increments.
Yeah. So, it's the history of racism, slavery, Jim Crow, all the, and institutionalized racism that, that took over after the institution of slavery was abolished, right? These other ways of, separating people, limiting the opportunities and opportunity for advancement for a large swath of Americans.
Absolutely. Yeah. What would you say, Ishqa? How about like where this came from and how it manifests itself?
Oh, I mean, for certain that, but then also as someone who's obsessed with business and systems and how things grow, looking at how most companies cater to where the money is, right? And so when you're living in a country that is systemically keeping people of color from affording certain things, then they're a smaller percentage of the market. So then you're also creating businesses that are ongoing and growing. And not to mention, if you are a business back then who is catering to people of color, you're quickly shut down. Like that's not encouraged, right? But then also, as growing businesses and living in this country and the way that we have been as oppressive as we have been, there weren't, I don't believe until more recent times, incentives enough for businesses to expand and grow, and
Create
that's just a sad reality of it. Of, when I worked corporate and we were looking at like, well, where should we open up a new dealership in the country? You go to where the cities are. When you're making a decision for your corporation, you're leaning towards, well, where's 80% of the market share? You're not looking at 100%.
Absolutely. And that speaks to how we became the underserved, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Why are we not a fair and equitable portion of the market share?
That defines it. That truly defines why we are the underserved, is the consequences for serving folks who look like me. And that's a huge thing. And anybody who has already watched any of this show knows that this is something that I say on a regular. That is a part of what we call systemic racism, but what I call the tradition of racism in the country is to underserve certain individuals. And that is what white privilege was born of. It's never, ever stopped. We can say we're living in this post-racism era all we like, but we're not post anything. We're right in the center of it. Exactly. Navigating through the center of it, swimming through the thickets. And it is very important that we all understand and get to the same page so that we can stop underserving. If I hear underserved one more time,
I know, right?
We have enough resources.
Why do we want to underserve
and
people?
Intellect to serve everyone. So
That
we make
part.
a choice.
It's the fear, right? It's the fear, the ego, the things that want us to that want us to deny others of having the same things we have, it's a sickness. I call it a sickness, and you'll see me publicly say there's the sickness again. And by sickness, I mean racism. And it's now, as you've said, become a tradition. And it's as American as apple pie. My friend Tiffany Watkins says
Christmas Day.
Oh,
we rely upon it. We save for it. We live our lives by it, and we're all affected by it. Even the oppressor and the oppressed are affected in the same way because we're trapped in it. Those who say, we've had a question come in.
Yes. And I was just going to say that because we say this, right? We say it definitively, but not everyone does.
Right. Not everyone does, and, I'm just going to go and read the question in its entirety. Why do some white folks seem to have blinders on when it comes to acknowledging the experiences of Black folks? And I think, there's a second part to that question, but I think that starting right there is really key. Why do white people have, say, blinders on? Why can't they see what's going on? And I say it is because we're all trapped in this tradition. And we keep perpetuating the same nonsense in the same circle. But ladies, why do you think that folks that look like you just have blinders on when it comes to the condition and the experience of folks who look like me?
I mean, do you know any white women who deny white privilege?
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to hear about them.
Of course I do. White women, white men. I know people of color who deny that there's, I trip out on those conversations. I really do.
What do you think the impetus for it is, though? Like, I would say it's a protectionism, right? It's fear. I often get the question of, well, how come you're always talking about reparations? You think I'm supposed to write you a check?
it's just the ignorance of it is so like, right. The conversation, Danielle, I don't know about you, but the conversation sometimes I'm like, oh, my chest hurts. I don't know if I can do this, but they have to be had, which is why sometimes I just got to pop off in the podcast too, and tell some stories and leave out the names. For certain, 2 years ago, certainly in the height of BLM, there was a lot of outcry. That's when I believe the bridges even began and these conversations started being had, because there was a lack of awareness, but also there's something that happens when you're white and you were first woken up to, hey, this is not something that ended when MLK died. Because I think a lot of people try to act like that, oh, well, we haven't been racist since he was killed, right? Because everyone was sad about that. Like, what? So people are just a little funny. But it's you look at Twitter switch over just a few days ago and you see it's very alive and well in this country. And I think people just don't want to deal with it. I think that, look, I know I have heard from white men, and because I've never understood it. And so I ask questions because I have the privilege of being able to ask questions of certain people. So I use that. That's one of mine. Yes, I do. I love to rile people up and ask them questions they don't expect to come from me. But, there's very much a mindset of this is how it's always been. People have always conquered. In Africa, they were enslaving their own tribes. Like, I've heard all the stories and all the reasons as to, because it's always been done, it just is the way it is. And so there's always a winner and there's always a loser. And so why not be the winner? And I think that that to me is where to have to acknowledge the other side means being able to give up your gains. And I don't think people are ready to do that. I don't think people want to differently. I don't think people want to look at how their privilege has afforded them for generations how to be able to live and what that means. And I think that that's just really hard to unravel for a lot of people.
It definitely means taking a deeper look at self. Yeah. Well, it means taking a deeper look at self, right? It means going inward. It means acknowledging flaws. It means asking yourself those questions that are courageous, but painful. Yeah.
Well, and not just, but then also, is it enough? Can you just sit there with the acknowledgement and then not do anything? You will change your whole entire life when you realize that it's that important.
That's a great point. Oh my gosh. Because change is scary, right? Growth sucks in some ways. Growth is vital and good. And, I think all of us want it. And it is scary. Like, it's a scary, difficult process. Absolutely. I mean, I think that, I totally agree with what you just said, Ishqa. And I would add that, when you're swimming in the waters of white privilege, you don't recognize that, that it's wet, right? It's when it's so pervasive. And also a lot of white privilege is what doesn't happen to you, right? And so it's hard to notice what doesn't happen to you. So I think that, unless you are truly exposed to the experiences of people of color in this country, and you if you're not living in a place or working in an industry where you're actually interacting much with people from other backgrounds, like, you need to do it in other ways, whether it's, just starting through consuming media, watching, movies, documentaries, webinars that discuss these issues. I think that for some people, that's a way in, like seeing other people's experience on video, or, seeing them speak about their experiences when it's something really different from one's own experience. That can be a good way in, more media portrayals. And I think that we are getting there. I mean, not getting there, but we're making progress in terms of better media portrayals, more, interesting conversations like these happening in public places. And, so I think some of it is just exposure. Like, I believe in I do believe in fundamental goodness in people. And so I do want to believe that if we are exposed and we get the education, that more people will understand and, want to work to change things.
I definitely agree with you on that, Danielle. I love that about you, that there is this part of your spirit that fundamentally sees goodness in people. And I am very, very similar to you in that way. And that is sometimes a challenge for me in my own community, because I will seek to look for the good first until you show me who you are, and then I believe you. But something that you said right now that piggybacked on what Ishqa was talking about really resonates with me. And that is the segregation that still exists in our country. So, and around the world. And for those who've traveled, like, you can go to Europe and you can see the slums or the underserved areas of Europe, and you can see the similarities of the way the people look who live in those areas. And by that, I mean people of color. And so here in the US, we have that same thing. I mean, I often talk to my kids and say, oh yeah, that's what we think because we live in LA. But that's not what they think in certain parts of North Carolina, particularly rural North Carolina or rural Idaho, right? And so I have to teach them, the next generation, the realities. And you're right. Like, some people don't have any Black friends. A lot of people in the United States have never sat down to have dinner with a person of color. Their entire community looks like them. They might be their cousins in certain areas, and that's all they know. And I'm not forgiving them. I am not giving them a pass, but I am absolutely acknowledging that you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And we say, like, where have you been? Under a rock? But yeah, if you don't have access to news, you don't have access to food, you live in a rural area, and this is all the algorithm is feeding you by way of information, you can easily continue to swim in the waters of your privilege because you never have to get out of it. So you don't even know you're wet. I love that. Yeah.
Now we're moving into the privilege of information. Because we have talked for a few minutes here, and I want to bring us all back down from the clouds, because we started this conversation talking about blinders. And what did we do throughout this? If I'm real, is I heard nothing but blinders, and that's come from everyone. Nothing but blinders. The bottom line is that there is media. Of course, there's always going to be more media coming out there, but is it the right media? When I turn on the news, in which I watch every day, I watch multiple outlets. And when I see that Black people are portrayed in still such a negative sense, nothing has changed from when I was a little girl. Just because we have a few Black princesses and things like that, we're taking stories that exist already and turning them into, stories that are our stories. We can't repackage this racism. We can't repackage this bias and call it something else. There are blinders to the Black experience or the experience of people of color in the United States, all over the world, but we're citizens of the United States, so let's stick domestic. There are so many blinders to our experience, wondering, are we all underserved? Do any of them have privilege? Nobody asks those questions. We're just in one big bundle. And so as long as folks bundle us into one category, you're blind to our real situation. And you could be in a rural area, sure, you could be right in smack dab in the middle of the city. But if your only source to find out about those who are not like you is television, radio, movies, and magazines or books, think about that. What story is really being told? When the news will report that someone was killed by someone else, will say a man killed a woman last night. But if they were Black, they will make sure to say a Black man killed a woman last night. But they won't say that about other races. What are you going to start to think about Black people if that's all you ever hear? You shouldn't have to go out seeking friendship in order to understand not to be segregated and biased. There has to be another way.
Those are systemic changes that need to happen like yesterday, right? I mean, I would say we need to rewrite the whole Constitution if we're going there. Right. Yeah, definitely. I saw that you wanted to say something, Danielle. You felt passionate about a point.
Okay, did I lose it? I was like passionate. Okay, so I think what I was meaning when I said consume more media and more conversations about the Black experience is very monolithic, but you know what I mean, about other people's experiences, people of color's experiences, diverse experiences. within the United States. I don't necessarily mean just turn on the news or watch like your network shows, because you're right. I mean, I don't think that there are accurate.
Unless you're watching a Club Kindness representative media show, like this one, like Bridges, Courageous Conversation.
But things like, you do have to go a little bit out of your way as a white person, I think, to educate yourself. But there are resources out there. For instance, if you're into cannabis, this documentary "Grass is Greener" on Netflix with Fab Five Freddy is really moving and really, illustrates, in a very human way, shows stories of individual people who have been incarcerated for cannabis unjustly for a very long time. Shows the absolute disproportionate effect of the drug war on people of color. So things like that. The Cut has a great video about showing how Black parents talk to their children about interaction with police, for instance. It's 10 minutes long. It's for anybody to consume and to learn from. I watched it. I cried. I was like, holy shit, I didn't know this. I didn't know that these ways that Black parents have talked to their kids about law enforcement. This was a few years ago, but things like that, you have to go out of your way a little bit. It's not
that's true. You have to go out of your way, right? You have to, because we're not coming to you anymore. We're not going to answer your questions. We're not going to be the Black representatives. You're right, Tiffany. Like, you don't have to go and seek out Black friends. And if you do, that's wonderful, but do it altruistically. Don't do it because you want me to tell you what Black women think about all these things. Exactly. And
or that you want to be able to be like, oh, I have Black friends, I'm not racist. Like, you don't get to just have like one or two Black friends and then not be racist anymore. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that doesn't give you cred, right? You said something earlier, Ishqa, about once you do these things, because Danielle's talking about like, well, I'm a student, right? I know that you are a scholar, Danielle. So you go seek out this information. You intentionally do that to try to be anti-racist and to push this information forward. But still, like, not everyone's doing that. Not everyone wants to do it. A hell of a lot of people don't care to do it and like where they sit. But then, Ishqa, you said something earlier, like, well, but if you start to do this and when you get this information, it's like, whew, what is that? What is that you were describing? How does it change you?
Oh, I mean, my journey really began, I do watch a lot of Black programming, actually. For me, it is more real. The stories are actually more familiar with what my upbringing was.
Talk about
my
that.
work began very young at 12 years old, being thrust into middle school in Oakland, downtown Oakland, where I was the minority, and we were also being taught American history by a Black teacher. And, I had a classroom full of pissed off students. And so, and I understood it. It didn't feel good, but I understood it. So I think some of what I was referring to earlier with the work is, once you're able to get over the whole white guilt thing, or not even get over, because I don't know that it ever really goes away. But once you have started working through that and you've made a commitment to the work and to learn, which the work is just learning how to be an ally, learning how to be able to advocate and speak out for the things that, the world we want to see. I'm like, hey, with Sesame Street taught us equality, like, I want that. I want what I was sold. And so, it's not just watching TV and believing it. It's going out into the communities that are feeling it and starting there and asking how to help. Not going in and telling how to help, what I'm going to do for you, but going in and asking, how can I help? What do you need? What's needed?
And listening. Because those closest to the problem typically know the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's really that's what it is for me. That's the work is just where to begin. And there's so many places, like, and look, I was in some of my privilege was having ended up in different juvenile halls and things, and then being privileged enough to go to a group home that completely changed my life. And you know, there weren't a lot of Black girls that went to this home. There was one in the 3 years that I was there.
With similar offenses, correct? So like you're looking at equity in your offense, but you got to go to this group home that allowed you access, and they were left behind.
Look, like that blew out even before. Like social services should have removed me from my home because of the abuse that I was experiencing, but they didn't because I was white. So that also like didn't work in my favor in that case either. You know, they kept me at home longer, even in
juvenile that keeps white families together.
They kept wanting to send me home. It was my parents that were like, oh, no. And I'm grateful now because like I needed to go to that group home. But the experiences of being in that juvenile hall, which first of all was the safest place I ever felt in my childhood, first place I felt safe. And those girls were my sisters because they taught me how to take care of my curly hair that my mom hated. And first time I ever had grits, and like there just was a lot that I was very embraced. And so then when I had to leave them, I didn't want to leave them. And I didn't understand why they couldn't come with me.
First lesson, young lessons in racism.
It was like a very young lesson in racism.
My first grade, first day in a new school, being told I can't play with you because you're Black. Wait, what does that even mean? Right? So these first lessons. You said something, Ishqa, that I don't want to gloss over. You said, once you get over the white guilt.
Well,
I want to go a little further on that.
Over it.
What is white guilt? Like, what is this thing you speak of, white guilt?
Oh, it is the realization of all the atrocities that were done because of something no one like present day has control over, skin color. Because of my skin color, my ancestors did things that are not even anywhere near in my heart to do, but that they did to other people. And now we all have to live with that mess. And we're all still living in it.
We're living in it.
And we're all still living in it.
You experience white guilt, Danielle?
Yes. Yes. And, you know, and shame over, you know, when sometimes when we get into really real conversations, you know, about things that I didn't even realize, or, you know, privileges I didn't even know that I had. And then I'm faced with actual stories from other people of how they, you know, experienced the same thing, for instance, and how much more difficult it was for them for no other reason than the fact that their skin was not white. I mean, yeah, that does bring guilt and shame. I think that, you know, if you want to be effective in the world, you do have to work with that, and you do have to be willing to, you know, go through it, go through that difficult stuff, or, you know, work with it, integrate it, and not let it, you know, turn you away.
So, I think that brings up another, maybe question that others might have, and I know I definitely do. With white guilt, I ride the fence on if that is a good thing for folks to say, or if that's just another layer of privilege. And so what I'd like to know is, then what do you do with these feelings? I respect the acknowledgement 100%. And I respect that it's a process and a journey for anyone experiencing this type of feeling, because anytime you enter guilt, there's emotion, there's, you know, the feeling of like hopelessness and trapped. So understanding that 100%, what can come from that? What is it that it motivates you to do?
I get to work.
Yeah.
I get to work. I've been getting to work for so long. Long Beach has this great program. It's been around 30, 40 years. California Conference for Equality and Justice. They do restorative justice here in the city. I did an HR facilitator training in that almost 20 years ago, to be able to help kids in high schools who go through the camps where they really, I mean, the activities and the exercises and things that they walk you through, the level of awareness that these children get to have in high school before they go out into the real world. Because in high school, they're still protected. And look, in Long Beach, we're in a bubble. I took my daughter on college tours and she was like, Mom, Where's my black friends?
Yeah.
What's going on? Like, we went to Chico. We weren't out of California even, you know, and it's just, we're in a bubble. And so it really helps, though, to be able to prepare children how to have these conversations and these realizations before going out into the real world. So that's one of the things, you know, always in my career, you know, diversity hires and not just for that, but because that's how it should be. We are stronger all together. The Canna Boss Babe, same thing. You know, I was so excited to be able to see the Celebrating Black Cannabis box that came out. I did one last year because I was so mad in 2020. I'd go into a dispensary and be like, where's my Black-owned brands? I got to spend my money with intention.
That's something
my
you can
money
do.
with intention.
Yeah.
And nobody knew. So then it became, hey, working with Mskindness on, hey, we need some education. Where's the Black history in cannabis? Which minimal, right? Sad, even that. Like, it is the same thing, but whew. But highlighting different brands, highlighting different people, being able to go out and help with expungement clinics and go into the communities where they're needed. Like, I have a nonprofit as well. You know, we go out and help the homeless every Monday and make sure that they're fed and even have showers and laundry. And the
You
work
get
is
to work.
endless.
You get
The
to
work
work.
is endless.
So it motivates you. So when the phrase comes up and they say, what is that? What do you do with it? So you've done something
It's work.
actionable. It is the process of everything that you do. It motivates you to stay aware and do more.
Absolutely.
And raise your kids and educate your kids. That stood out for me because they are the warriors, right? That's my army. My Micah and Minia, they are armed. They are armed. They are armed because I'm going to pass on. And I need to make sure that that legacy knows how to act, how to have these courageous conversations. So that piece too. I like
and that means
Yeah.
voting. That means voting. We're voting next week. I don't know when this is airing, but it doesn't matter because that also means voting. Because when in a city as large as Long Beach has only 17% of voters show up to vote.
Who do you think that is?
How do we get more representation in office? How do we get more community leaders elected in order to be able to make sure that the money that these cities get is going into the programs that will uplift the communities that need it most? It's everywhere. Like there's to me, and having lived in a city where there was like one Black family, right? When I got in my group home and there was one Black family in the whole city, we all knew them. Everybody, you know, like
everybody knew the Black family,
right? It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We live in a country where this is a fucking issue. Can I say that?
Yes, it's fine.
It's an issue. Educate yourself. If you've ever read a newspaper, if you've ever turned on the TV, if you've ever read a history book, you can if you want to.
Yes.
And the work is limitless. So don't tell me you can't find something to do, because that's not a thing.
That's not a thing. That is not a thing.
That's a good one. That's a good quote. Don't tell me you can't find something to do. There's plenty to do. That is for sure. I mean, on that conversation of kids, well, if you wanted me to address the white guilt thing again, I can, which is, I think that.
No, the action.
Okay.
What is it? And what do you say to the white person?
I was only talking about motivation. When we hear this, we hear a lot of these terms, right?
Right.
And so in the, what we want to do is make sure that folks are hearing all sides of these terms. So we hear that, we've defined it. We understand it's a process. We understand what goes through that, but what's next?
Yeah.
What happens after that? That is what my question was designed to uncover.
Well, to address that, I think that unfortunately for some people, what comes next is shutting down and not engaging further. So that's like one lane you can take when the guilt comes
when the
up.
guilt rises.
Yes. Yeah. And then the other lane is like what Ishqa detailed. This is, go for it, dig in. Let's do this work. Let's do what we have to do. And part of that work for me, very, very important part of that work is talking to my kids and teaching them And, just like cannabis, using, lots of everyday situations as like, a springboard to have these important conversations. Something comes up in the news. Oh, hey, let's unpack that. Let's discuss it. How do we look at it from a justice and equity angle?
Yes.
We just saw this program. Like, wow, let's unpack that. What were the portrayals of Black characters in there? So many different opportunities, books. Just like I keep coming back to media because
that's a lot of work, Danielle. That's a lot of work, because between what Ishqa just defined and you talking about this emotional work with raising young people, it's a lot of work to constantly have to face those realities. And there are people who would rather, and I think a large majority do, the first thing you mentioned, the former, I feel the shame,
Turn
I feel
on
the
King of the Hill.
yeah. I feel the game.
Laugh
I feel
about it instead, like it's normal and okay.
Yeah. Because it's more comfortable, which is what you alluded to in the beginning, Danielle. The first thing you can do is feel the shame and then go, oh, I don't like that, so I'm not going to feel it.
Right. Which I think is pretty human, not just when confronted with race and social justice, but when confronted with anything, in our relationships, in our intimate relationships, in our friendships, in our, relationships with our parents. Like, shame shuts us down a lot. I think that, as a culture, we need to learn how to deal with shame, how to process shame and actually turn it into something else. We can't stop there and keep going down, like on the emotional scale. I think shame is the like lowest vibration emotion. Like you can't really do a lot from there. You can even do more with anger, right, than you can with shame. And I mean, righteous anger can be fueled toward good. I think that too.
Absolutely.
It's not like the highest emotion we can work from, but it's absolutely an effective one. So yeah, I think that you're right. Like, there are lots of different ways to respond to this, but as I'm a fan of Brene Brown's work, and I think that when we really do talk about shame and talk about these issues, it makes it a little bit easier. But I've done it. I've shut down. I have felt shame and been like, okay, well, I don't really want to think about that right now. I don't want to go down that path because I have that privilege, honestly, to not have to engage with the work all the time.
These shared experiences, though, too, like, us, Tiffany and I, having the conversation and intentionally choosing a cast for this episode that are white women, right? White women to talk about the experiences that you've had. And I know that the two of you have had different childhood experiences, very different upbringings, but can still find these similarities that exist in the world you were in, regardless of socioeconomic upbringing, parental status, familial, structure, all of that. The reality is, walking through the world, looking the way you two do, of course, you're very beautiful women first and foremost, but with that white skin, you get to move in ways that nobody's watching.
Yeah. And in a sense, you get to, there's an ease of movement and time for you to process things before the next thing comes to you. I really enjoyed that we unpacked this the way that we did, especially bringing in the guilt or the shame and things like that. I think that's important to layer that into privilege, and that the two of you understand that there is a privilege in that. Because walking around as a Black person, we live in shame. Why? Because we're humiliated on a daily basis for just being who we are. And that is a difficult way to raise your children, to navigate in a society that they're going to have to battle those same humiliations, because it's not like, oh, Nana, it's you show up for a job and you're qualified and credentialed, but you're not good enough.
I have to tell my Black son to take his hoodie off.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just things like that. I have a younger brother and who's much younger than me, and I've had to say, don't do that. Don't dress that way. Don't make them think that you're like.
Even though I want you to be able to wear whatever the hell you want, son. Exactly. I want you to rock whatever style you want. Have that big ass afro and don't comb it if you don't want. Develop free-forming dreadlocks. But listen, this is what the people are going to say about you if you do.
Right. This is what they're going to think of you if you do. So there's that level of shame and humiliation just about the very essence of who we are. And so there's a freedom in that privilege that for there's a freedom of privilege in the white guilt, so to speak, as a thing itself, where you get to choose if you're going to really feel guilty today about it or not, or you can sit it on a shelf if you wish to. Not that you would. Okay, so I don't want anyone to feel offended. What I'm saying is that you can, if you wish, put it on a shelf. There is nothing I could strip down from my skin and walk around, skeletal as muscle. But that would be the only thing that I could do to remove that aspect from my life or from those who look like me. So there's a real marked difference that I think needs to be out there in the ether for everyone to see and go, oh, okay, that's there. But we definitely, I think that this has been a most enlightening conversation, a wonderful piece to the puzzle. And there's more pieces, but this is a deliciously open piece that I think will be just something that folks will talk about.
Oh man, I hope y'all had your notebooks out
today.
Yeah, same. When you're watching this episode, maybe I should have said this at the beginning, but you should have a notebook out and you should be writing down some of the resources you receive. But we are available to you. Myself, Tiffany, the Bridges team, any of the guests on any of our episodes are open and willing to engage in more dialogue just like this so that we can really, truly impact change. That's what the series has been designed for. And you're right. This episode, we could just go on and on because there's so much to discuss. I do want to thank you both for being here, for your honesty, for your candor, for your vulnerability and facing the guilt, facing the shame, not shutting down. All of the things that we're talking about have to be done for this work to move forward. It's just so special to be able to facilitate conversations like this. It's like what you said, Ishqa. This is just one little part of the work. There's so much to do. So pick a thing and do it.
Just anything. I really appreciate the opportunity actually to be able to share this. I know it's something a lot of people are afraid to talk about, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't even a little nervous. You never know where the conversation's going to go, but I know that I'm here for it. And I know that, like, for me, just showing up, just show up. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to show up for this today.
Thank you. The Bridges, we try to keep the Bridges stage safe.
Yeah, thank you. I truly also appreciate, I feel super honored to be here and be having this conversation and for this to be possible, Yeah.
Yeah, there's magic that happens here. And there's a lot of breathing you'll see me do in the episodes. A lot of, because these truths, they're hard hitting. They're hard hitting, but they're necessary. They are critical. And that is why we are here. And so thank you, Tiffany. We rock until the wheels fall off to bring this message to the people. Yes. I appreciate you again, Ishqa Hillman, for being here. Danielle, Simone Brand, everyone watching this episode. They are easy to find, especially with names like that. So just look them up and take these conversations further. Take them back into your homes. Take them to your employees. Take them to your coworkers, your companies, your partners, your friends, and search, research, look, Google.
Yeah.
This has been a wonderful episode of Bridges, episode 7 in season 1, centering around race, equity, and inclusion. This is a conversation about white privilege, and it's been amazing. Thank you.